focus of this video is time in After Effects. So what I've got is a piece of footage. It's already slowed down. It's just a kind of piece of stock footage. I'll play it back, some of it now, in After Effects. As you can see, it's just a dancer moving backwards. It's only about 20 seconds, but that is the original that we are working with. And what I've done, if you look on the left-hand side of the screen at the bottom, I've created different layers that I'm going to turn on and off to show you the different effects that are available to you in After Effects, where they are and how you might use them. Okay, so that's the original. So I'm now going to turn off this layer and go on to the first batch of things that you can do in After Effects. So this is, if you right click on one of these tracks, these are the tracks here. So I'm on this track here. And if I was to right click on it, as I'm doing here now, you'll see that there are some options here. I've already applied one, so some of these are grayed out, but right clicking on the track brings up these things that you can apply to it. So I'll go through each of those in turn. So let's turn that off. Enable time remapping. So what I've done is I've chosen time, enable time remapping, and if I untwirl this track, you'll see that time remapping essentially allows me to put keyframes in and then say what part of the video I want to be at that particular keyframe. So at the moment, the first one here, 0, and then it goes to the next one. In fact, let's delete these. I'll do it from scratch. So we're at 0, and this should play back normally, this normal video. But let's say I want at the 2-second mark, approximately about there. What I'm going to do is put a keyframe in, and I'll say I actually want to be at 4 seconds. Now, that will essentially mean that this plays back a bit faster in order to get to that point. But it's slightly more flexible than that, in that I could then come to here and say by this point I actually want to go backwards and I want to be back at, let's say, 2 seconds. So I go forward quite quickly there and then should be going backwards a bit slower there like that. So you can see this way I can very precisely move, shuttle back and forth through the video with precise times. And I can actually illustrate what's going on there. If I call up the graph, that's this little button here. And this shows me in terms of the speed, I go up to 200%, then go down to about minus 70% or something along those lines. So there's normal rate. So we go backwards for a period of time there like that. So that's time remapping, which enables you to move the time back and forth as you see fit. So I'll turn off that track, twirl that back up, and the next one is time reverse layer. This is very straightforward. You just drop it on. It's a one-hit wonder, so just turn this on, view the track, and it simply takes the layer and reverses it. So if we were to watch this now, it's just the clip going backwards. Not a lot to that, so I won't dwell on it. Next up is time stretch, and twirl this one down here. What I can do is, in fact, if I time stretch here, when I click on it, it asks me for a value. And there's something similar to this in Premiere Pro. If you remember, I think it's time speed, and you can put in a percentage value, so that's up here, or a duration value. So the original clip is 22 seconds. I think I've already set this at 10 seconds, but say I wanted this clip to play back in 5, I think I can just add in that there like that. So now you see the clip's much shorter as a consequence of that. So that should be a very fast playback of the clip. There we go. Yeah, and it just takes 5 seconds. I could have inputted a percentage value alternatively, but that feature is readily available in Premiere Pro, so don't need to come into After Effects to do that. Next up is freeze frame, and we are on freeze frame. And again, you right click on the timeline. I think I should be able to show you the prompt here. Time, freeze frame. And it's, if you scroll this down, you see it's got a an indicator on timeline. That's the point at which it's frozen. So it's frozen on that particular frame. Next up is freeze on last frame, and this does exactly as it says on the tin. So when it comes to the last frame of the track, it simply holds it. So if we were to go all the way to here, right, and what I would need to do is to stretch the track beyond that point to actually include the freeze frame. So say that is the last frame of the actual video, which I believe it is, then if I extend the track outwards, it will carry on holding that frame beyond that particular point, as you can see there like that. Turn that one off. Next up, now this is a different case in point, and as a consequence of that, what I'm going to do is actually play back a video in, in fact, I'll probably just drop the video in at this point.
Design motion graphics with data and access mask and shape path points and expressions in After Effects CC. Create compositions that would take ages to do by hand by importing JSON files as assets and referencing their values and expressions. Data can drive all sorts of projects, from motion capture and sensor visualizations to infographics like this map. Update or replace your data, and it will update instantly in After Effects. You can also access individual mask and shape path points and expressions, or use the new Create Nulls from Paths panel to easily connect points together or animate along a path without writing a line of code. Link path points to other layers or data sources, or even create new paths with expressions. After Effects CC opens up new possibilities for creating dynamic, easy-to-update motion graphics.
I'm not going to spend any more time on that. So all of the above are things that you right-click on the layer and choose time, and then you can add these to it. So that's basic functionality. But the next group, turn off the video there. The next group are to be found here up in Effects. And if you go to Effects, there's a whole host of them. Some you may have on your machine, some you may not. But if you scroll right down to where you come to time, and then you'll see there's a clutch of effects. And what you do is select these when you've got a layer highlighted, and then that will apply it to the layer. Alternatively, if you go here, you'll see effects. You can search for time, or you can scroll down time. You can just click and drag those onto the particular layer that you wish to effect. So effects, the first one, I will link in the description to a more detailed explanation of this, but quite often you want to apply motion blur to a subject. And with all of these effects, if you want to see the parameters that are in use at a time, if you press W when you've got a track highlighted, it shows you the parameters for the effect. So here, CC Force Motion Blur. I can also go up to effects controls here, and this will show me the things that I can alter. Almost all of these parameters have a stopwatch, so you can keyframe them or apply expressions, which I'm going to come to last. So in the instance of this, and this is quite a processor intensive task, it will apply motion blur to a moving subject. The shutter angle will determine the kind of shutter speed in force at the time. Again, I will direct you to the document because otherwise I could spend quite a bit of time explaining this. But by altering these parameters, you can apply some degree of motion blur to the image on the screen. And so I'm going to move on from that one. Now, this is a strange kind of effect. As you can see, it's already in place. And what it does, it gives you both images before and after the actual image that's being played back at the time. So let's go back to the beginning and play this CC wide time. Yes, got that on. So here we are. And at the moment, it's showing 5 forward steps and 100 backward steps. So if you imagine like 100 frames prior to where we actually are is still kind of on screen, as well as 5 steps forward of where we are. And it creates this kind of trail effect, as you can see there. So if I alter these values, bear in mind I'm trying to record this at the same time as trying to get the machine to render this, but let's change that around to 105. And play forward from this point. Now you can imagine what would be quite interesting is if I keyframe these values over time, so I could have the subject catching up to themselves or getting ahead of themselves or creating a kind of echo in the context of that. After Effects is obviously trying to render this out, so I'm not sitting this back at anything like real time, but you can see the nature of the effect that it's generating there like that. So from that one, something does something slightly different, but it has multiple kind of exposures going on, is the echo effect. Again, you can keyframe these. Number of echoes that I want. So you see this says 5, so there's the original, and they've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 echoes behind that. Starting intensity. Now what you find is because it's kind of got multiple exposures on there, if I was to set this to 1, the screen should go quite bright. No, because I've set this to minimum, but if I have it on add, you see it's just too much. So the best results I found was having it on minimum, and the intensity, if you drop that down, that's how strong the actual image is. But I would set this to minimum, otherwise the image is going to be overexposed because you've got multiple instances of the same image going on there. Decay is how long it takes to fade. So if I wanted this a lot longer, so if I have this to 2 seconds, and just for argument's sake, let's have 7 of those, and now like this. Let's see what that's like. So it's going to take 2 seconds to fade. Okay, so let's just try altering the echo time. So I'm -1 at the moment, so let's try -0.5. That's the gap between them, so they should be a lot closer together now. Yeah. Yeah, it's quite interesting. So if you're interested in that. Pixel motion blur is a variation of CC force motion blur. So I'm not going to cover that, but it is covered in the document that I put below. Posterise Time is something that's available in Premiere Pro, and this enables you to change the frame rate. So it's a kind of akin to stop motion. So I can, if I just highlight this layer, double U, you see it comes to, shows me where, if there are keyframes here. So I could click this stopwatch and then apply it by keyframes, Posterise Time, frame rate. So at the moment, what have I set it to? 2, I think. So let's try this. So we should get 2 frames a second. Okay, so I could increase the frame rate, decrease the frame rate over time if I keyframe that. So I think this footage is originally 24, so if I put it to 24, then that should just play back normally. So that's Posterise Time, as I say, already available in Premiere Pro. Time difference is kind of interesting, and this is covered again in the document. You can see what the hell's going on there. It's quite often used to create motion trails for like smoke coming out of the back of an object, or a kind of shadow effect. And what it asks is so I'm using as the target track 15, which is the original version of this, and creating a time offset. So I'm having that appear at 1 second, and you can see there's 2 distinct ones there. I can up the contrast, and I imagine that I could probably layer this, if I quite like that, with different kind of contrast levels to create. So rather than an echo where the thing is exactly the same, I could create them of different kind of colorations and intensity. Oh, we've gone, yeah, you see what's happened now? I've kind of, no, which one did I switch there? Yeah, so when the contrast is 0, So again, you see I could keyframe this. They actually disappear at one point. So we switch from the foreground figure to the background figure. So let me see. So if I play this back here now, so we've got that figure there. So I could keyframe that, and they switch places, and now they're back the other way there like that. So time displacement is the next one up. There we go. Turn this on. I'm actually, rather than using the layer which is the same as this, I'm using this layer here, which is a still graphic. Okay, so that is the displacement layer that I'm using, and then so turn that off again, go back here. That is using that to alter the video. So I'm not quite sure what I would use this for in the first instance, but that's certainly kind of intriguing. You can imagine if it's a moving layer, then this would morph perhaps in more interesting ways. Obviously kind of static, but immediately we've got quite an interesting glitch effect just by having the effects still image interact with the moving image there. Now time warp is probably the one that most might want to use, and it's got quite a few parameters that you can alter here. I've got this at 1/3 resolution just so that it can update reasonably manageably. So if I press U, you can see what I've done already on the time warp. The parameter I've changed is the speed. So this is a way in which I can put keyframes in to alter the speed over time. So we start off at 100, it goes to 200, and then drops right down to 14%. So I could come here, you set a keyframe by just going there like that. So let me say I could set this to 150, so that would then speed up again. If you want to visualize that, again, you can click this layer thing. That's what's happening. Obviously, the entire duration of the clip will shrink or increase as you speed up and slow down. But just to illustrate what's happening there. So there, now it should slow right down. Quite difficult to show because it's trying to work this out as we go. Now it should speed up quite a bit as a consequence of that. Now, as it's rendered, that should be able to see. So speeds up, yeah, slow right down there, and then speeds back up there. So this is something, if you wanted the effect of somebody, accelerating through a scene and then like almost going into slow-mo, particularly good if you're able to isolate the character from the scene or use means to kind of create different tempo of movement in a particular scene. But you'd use the time warp. This is probably the most directly useful thing you might want to use on this. So let's twirl up some of these so I can see where we are. So finally, time and expressions. So let's turn off this and expressions. Resolution is terrible on that. Let's have to go to full resolution. Expressions, I may have touched on these in the first session, and I will do a separate After Effects video on expressions. There are people who are considerably gifted in writing very complex expressions that do wonderful things in After Effects. But this is just to show you how you might use expressions in relation to time. And as I say, I'll cover this in more detail. So an example of using the expression called time, so as time passes in After Effects. Now, if I want to use an expression rather than keyframe, what I do is I hold down on a Mac, it's the Option key, and click the parameter. So I click rotation. Okay. Now, as I've done that, it's actually removed the expression. But the expression I had in there was just simply time, semicolon. Okay. In relation to rotation. And without any other kind of things attached to that, it will take 1 as its default. So because it's rotation, it means it will advance 1 every second. So it will rotate 1 degree every second. So if I press it back very slowly, the whole entirety of the frame will start rotating. Okay, but because it is capable of arguments, I can come in here, edit this. So I can just add time, and then asterisk for times 10. Okay, still need the semicolon at the end. And now it's going to move it 1 degree a second, but multiply it by 10. So in effect, 10 degrees a second. And let's hope this works. And there we go.